are some mysteries that seem to resist explanation, not because there is no answer, but because the answer somehow feels almost as strange as the mystery itself. In February of 2013, a young Canadian woman named Elisa Lam disappeared from a hotel in downtown Los Angeles. 3 weeks later, her body was discovered inside a rooftop water tank. But before that discovery, police released a piece of surveillance footage showing Elisa inside an elevator, and that video would become one of the most infamous pieces of footage on the internet. She appears frightened, confused. She presses buttons. She looks into the hallway. She steps outside. She waves her arms, and at one point, she seems to be hiding from someone who isn't visible anywhere in the frame. Millions of people would watch that video and ask the same question: what was Elisa Lam running from? The theories came quickly. A murderer, a secret passage, a paranormal encounter, an elevator that supposedly behaved strangely, even portals to other dimensions. But beneath all of those theories is something considerably more unsettling, because the official explanation is both mundane and deeply disturbing. Tonight on Stranger Thangs, we're going into the Cecil Hotel, following Elisa Lam's final days, examining that haunting elevator video, climbing onto the roof where nobody expected to find her, and separating the documented facts from the mythology that grew around her death. This is the strange but true story of Elisa Lam. Elisa Lam was 21 years old. She was Canadian, from Vancouver, British Columbia, and had attended the University of British Columbia. By all accounts, she was an ordinary young woman with an extraordinary amount of curiosity about the world. She traveled, she wrote, she photographed her experiences, and in January of 2013, she decided to take a trip through California. On January 26, Elisa traveled from Vancouver to Los Angeles. She was traveling alone. Eventually, she checked into a downtown Los Angeles hotel called the Cecil. And if you're familiar with the Cecil, you already know that this was not exactly the sort of place you'd expect someone to choose for a peaceful vacation. The Cecil had opened in 1924. Over the decades, the hotel developed a grim reputation because of numerous deaths, suicides, murders, and other disturbing incidents associated with the property. But there's an important distinction here. The Cecil didn't have some supernatural curse hanging over it. It was an old hotel located in one of Los Angeles's most troubled neighborhoods, and over many decades, it housed thousands upon thousands of people. With that many people passing through, tragedy was statistically inevitable. Still, the hotel's reputation mattered, and Elisa had no idea that she was about to become the most famous mystery ever associated with the building. She had reportedly planned to continue her trip north towards Santa Cruz. She was also accustomed to communicating with her family while traveling. Then, suddenly, the communication stopped. Elisa was supposed to check out of the hotel. She didn't. Her family became concerned, and by early February, authorities were searching for her. At first there was nothing, no body, no obvious crime scene, no clear explanation for where she had gone. And then investigators found something that would change everything. On February 14th, 2013, the Los Angeles Police Department released surveillance footage of Elisa inside the Cecil's elevator. The footage was only a few minutes long, But those few minutes became one of the most dissected pieces of surveillance video ever released to the public. Elisa enters the elevator. She presses several buttons. Then something strange happens. She appears to wait. The doors don't close immediately. She leans toward the hallway, looks out, then steps back inside. She presses more buttons. She moves toward the corner. She looks outside again, and then she suddenly leaves the elevator. But she doesn't simply walk away. She moves her arms. She appears to gesture towards something. She looks around the hallway. Then she disappears from the camera's view. The elevator doors remain open, and that's the moment that launched 1,000 theories, because whoever Elisa appeared to be reacting to wasn't visible. There is no obvious person standing in the hallway. No attacker suddenly appears. No one enters the elevator. Nothing supernatural is visible. It's just Elisa, alone, behaving in a way that is extremely difficult to interpret without knowing what was happening inside her mind. The footage went viral, and the internet did what the internet does. People slowed it down, enhanced it, analyzed individual frames, reversed it, added music, studied the elevator's movements. Some people became convinced that another person had been digitally removed. Others suggested Elisa was playing an alleged supernatural game, sometimes associated with elevators. Still others claimed the elevator itself was malfunctioning, and then came the paranormal theories. Some suggested Elisa had encountered a ghost. Others claimed she was communicating with something invisible, and eventually, people began suggesting that the Cecil might somehow have been a portal. But there was a problem with all of these theories. There was no actual evidence supporting them. And while the footage looked bizarre, bizarre does not automatically mean inexplicable. Sometimes the strangest footage is simply footage of a person experiencing something we cannot see. And there was something about Elisa's medical history that would become critically important later. She had bipolar disorder. That fact was not initially known to the public in the same way it became known after the investigation. And eventually, investigators would have to ask a very difficult question. Could what we were watching in that elevator actually be evidence of a psychiatric episode rather than an encounter with another person? But before anyone could answer that question, they had to find Elisa. And they weren't finding her. The hotel was searched. Investigators examined Elisa's room. Her belongings were still there. There was no obvious sign that she'd packed up and left. Search dogs were used. Investigators searched areas of the hotel and its exterior. And yet Elisa was nowhere to be found. This created one of the central mysteries of the case. If she had left the hotel, where did she go? And if she hadn't, where could someone disappear inside a building that had already been searched? Then something happened that transformed the investigation. Guests began complaining about the hotel's water. There were reports of low water pressure. Some guests reported unusual water quality. The hotel's water system was supplied by large rooftop tanks. And on February 19th, a maintenance worker went onto the roof to inspect them. He opened one of the tanks and looked inside. There was a body. It was Elisa Lam. She had been missing for approximately 3 weeks. She was found inside one of the hotel's large water tanks. And suddenly, the bizarre elevator footage had a horrifying context. The strange girl in the elevator wasn't missing anymore. She was dead. And she had somehow ended up on the roof and inside a water tank. The question now became, how? This is where the case becomes especially difficult to process. The tanks were enormous, and they were located on the roof. Access to the roof was not supposed to be available to ordinary hotel guests. There was an interior route involving a locked door and alarm system. while fire escapes also provided potential access, so investigators had to determine how Elisa could have reached the roof. Then came another problem. How did she get inside the tank? The tanks were tall and difficult to access. The discovery was so bizarre that many people immediately assumed she must have been murdered. After all, why would a young woman voluntarily climb into a rooftop water tank? It seemed impossible, and the circumstances surrounding the discovery were almost surreal. Her body had been in the water long enough for decomposition to occur. Her clothing and personal effects were recovered. There was no obvious indication of a violent struggle, and importantly, there were no signs of significant physical trauma indicating that someone had beaten or stabbed her. Still, an initial autopsy did not immediately provide a definitive answer. Authorities initially had to wait for toxicology results. For a short time, the official position remained uncertain. Accident? Homicide? Something else? The internet, meanwhile, had already decided. The theories became increasingly elaborate. Some people suggested a murderer had somehow entered the roof, killed Elisa, placed her body inside the tank, and escaped without leaving obvious evidence. Others pointed to the hotel's notorious history. Some connected Elisa's death to the 2005 horror film Dark Water, which involved a mysterious water tank and a dead child. The similarities were eerie, but they were also just similarities. And then there was perhaps the most famous question of all. How could Elisa have gotten inside the tank if the hatch was difficult to reach? It was the kind of question that seemed to demand a sinister answer. But the investigation was still underway, and science was about to provide one. In June 2013, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office announced its conclusion. Elisa Lam died by accidental drowning. Her bipolar disorder was identified as a significant condition. Toxicology testing did not show drugs contributing to her death, and investigators found no evidence establishing that someone else had killed her. That conclusion is important because it doesn't mean every detail of Elisa's final moments is known. It doesn't. There is still uncertainty about exactly how she reached the roof. There is still uncertainty about precisely what she was experiencing inside that elevator, and there is no surviving witness who can tell us what happened during her final minutes. But the official conclusion is considerably less mysterious than the internet mythology. The evidence points toward Elisa entering the roof area herself and somehow entering the water tank, and once inside, she could not get out. That's the tragedy hidden underneath the mystery. A young woman appears to have been experiencing a severe disturbance in perception or behavior. She wandered into an area she shouldn't have been in. She entered a dangerous structure, and then she drowned. There is no hidden killer required, no supernatural explanation required, no secret experiment, no portal, no conspiracy, just a chain of terrible circumstances. And yet, one question remains incredibly difficult. How did nobody find her sooner? Even after the coroner's ruling, the Elisa Lam case continued to generate questions. One of the biggest involved the roof. Why didn't the initial searchers locate her? And how exactly did she reach the tank? The answer is less cinematic than many theories suggest. The hotel had multiple possible routes to the roof, including fire escapes. The rooftop itself was not some sealed vault, and while the interior roof access was supposed to be restricted, the existence of fire escapes complicated that picture. The idea that nobody could possibly have reached the roof became exaggerated online. Another question involved the water. How could hotel guests have been using water connected to a tank containing a decomposing body? The answer is unpleasant, but straightforward. The hotel had multiple large tanks. Elisa was found in one of them, After the discovery, health authorities tested the water and issued temporary precautions. Testing indicated that the water met microbiological standards at the time it was sampled. And then there's the elevator, perhaps the biggest mystery of all. What was Elisa doing? We simply don't know. We can watch her movements, we can describe them, we can speculate about them, but we cannot see what she was seeing. That distinction matters. The video feels like a message, but it isn't. It's a fragment. A few minutes of someone's life stripped completely of context. And because we don't know the context, our brains desperately try to invent one. That's how mysteries are born. There is something deeply unsettling about the Elisa Lam case. Not because the evidence points towards something supernatural. It doesn't. Not because investigators uncovered some secret conspiracy. They didn't. And not because the case remains officially unsolved. It doesn't. The death of Elisa Lam was officially ruled an accidental drowning. But sometimes an answer can still leave you uncomfortable, because we know what happened. We know where she was found. We know how she died. We know what the medical examiner concluded. And yet, we don't know what Elisa was thinking. We don't know what she believed she was seeing in that elevator. We don't know what made her leave it. We don't know what happened during those final minutes between the hallway and the roof, and we will probably never know. The internet turned Elisa Lam into a mystery, a ghost story, a conspiracy, a piece of viral horror. But underneath all of that was a real 21-year-old woman, a daughter, a student, a traveler, someone with hopes, fears, plans, and an entire life ahead of her. And perhaps the strangest thing about the Elisa Lam story isn't that there was never an explanation. There was. It's that the real explanation is somehow harder to accept than the supernatural ones. Because sometimes there isn't a monster hiding in the shadows. Sometimes there isn't a killer waiting around the corner. Sometimes the terrifying thing is simply that human beings can become lost inside their own minds, and that a few minutes of confusion can lead somewhere from which there is no way back. The elevator doors close, the hallway goes quiet, and Elisa Lam disappears from view. What happened next is no longer a mystery, but the question of what she experienced during those final moments belongs to Elisa alone, and she took that answer with her. I'm Mortimer, and this is Stranger Thangs, and until next time, keep looking into the strange. Because sometimes the truth isn't hiding in the darkness. Sometimes the truth is the darkness.